Welcome to the Good Book Club podcast, where we make all our book club meetings available for viewers and listeners to enjoy. In this book club meeting, we discuss the book No Nonsense Spirituality, All the Tools, No Belief Required by Brittney Hartley. Britt was able to join us for most of the meeting and answer questions that our book club members had about the book. I know you'll find this discussion absolutely fascinating and enlightening. This book club meeting was originally held on Sunday, December 10th, 2024.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Good Book Club. It is Sunday. It's November 10th. It's one of my kids' birthdays today and one of my good high school friends' birthdays. So that's always fun. I got to remember to send some greetings out. But thank you, everybody, for being here. We're going to start out by reading our mission statement, and I'll read that. We read this at the beginning of each of our book club meetings just to kind of remind everybody of, why we're here and what we hope to accomplish. The Good Book Club mission statement. The Good Book Club was created to bring together nuanced Mormons, post-Mormons, and others with a shared interest in Mormonism. We are introspective, critical thinkers seeking to learn, connect, and build relationships through the catalyst of literature. We welcome all who are searching for a safe space to share authentic thoughts, feelings, and ideas through open dialogue and shared experiences relative to Mormon culture. As we deconstruct previous beliefs, we encourage all to find happiness in the process of discovering new religious ideologies, spirituality, and life philosophies. So that's us, the Good Book Club. And I feel like over the last 5 years, we've done a pretty good job of sticking to this. So I love our mission statement. All right, a couple just slides at the beginning before we dive into our actual book club meeting. Thrive was yesterday. I think some of you that are zooming in with us today were there. I think I met several of you. Thrive was really fun. If you guys have the opportunity, and we try to advertise this in the book club, the next one is in St. George. It's going to be the end of February. So start looking for information on that now. It's just a great experience. It was packed, as you can see right there on the upper left. Britt Hartley, our author today, she gave a wonderful presentation. Landon and I, who were there, had the chance to meet the amazing Heather Gay. It was just a really awesome, as Kendall, our presenter today, described it, rejuvenating experience for everybody to just get together with a bunch of other people who kind of have a similar mindset and learn and talk. And John DeLynn gave an excellent address. So can't recommend Thrive enough. You can find local groups usually by going thrivebeyondreligion.com. And then they have the special events a couple times a year like this. So lots of good times. So let's talk about a couple upcoming events or things that are going on. We want to let everybody know, I think there are some new people here. This is our book list. You can also find this on our Facebook page. And if you're only connected to us through emailing, I always include this in any email we sent out. All of our books are voted on by our members. So it's user-led. And this is our list for the entire next year, which is really, really exciting. We always have a preview of our book coming up for the next month at the current book club meeting. But I do want to point out right in the middle, Second Class Saints. That's our book for January. This is a longer book. Pick this up and start reading now. We're going to have the author Matt Harris on with us. It is a mind-blowing book. Landon has been reading it. He's been traveling internationally with nothing else to do. And he keeps calling me going, you won't believe this. So now audiobook will be available for this sometime in January, but I don't know that it will be before book club. So we might just have to do it old school and read. So I'd suggest picking this up now so that you can kind of make your way through it before January. So, and the rest of the books are great. You can find, again, like I said, the list on our Facebook page or via email. All right, let's look at our next slide. 2 other books that are on the radar here. There's so many good books. We can't even narrow it down to 12, but these are awesome. We learned that Heather Gay, who wrote Bad Mormon, you guys probably all remember that. She has a new book coming out in December, right around Christmas. It's called Good Time Girl. She's so cute. And she talked about how this is a book about everything she couldn't say in Bad Mormon. She wrote Bad Mormon very close to the time of her deconstruction, and now she's had some time to process, and she's got more to say. So this looks really good. You can pre-order this now, and we'll talk more about this as we get closer. Another excellent book. Cannot recommend this enough. The incredible Laura Lee Hall. We've podcasted with her a couple times on Mormonish Podcast. She has put out a book, Dictates of Conscience. This is coming out November, I think, 20th. And you have to pre-order this. You have to read this book. It's absolutely incredible, Laura Lee. And so everybody jump on Amazon right now and order these 2 books. It's going to be great. I should work for Amazon. I promote so many things. So our book club coming up for December, which is going to be on Sunday the 8th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, is Unorthodox, the Scandalous, Rejection of My Hasidic Roots by Deborah Feldman. We're going to have a more in-depth preview of this at the end of our presentation. But Bruce was mentioning that he had started reading this, and just the parallels to Mormonism, pretty incredible. So this is going to be a wonderful read for Christmas time. All right. Now we're going to move on to our actual meeting today. We are going to be talking about no-nonsense spirituality, the incredible Britt Hartley. And I don't know, because I don't have a full grid. Has Britt joined us?
She's here.
Yay, Britt, there she is. She's waving her hand right there. This is a big group.
Hello, everyone.
This is a big group. Hello, there she is. So I think we're so thrilled that you can join us. And your presentation yesterday was just amazing. We're just so excited, and your book is so good. I wonder if we could just start out with you just giving us a little background on you and how this book came to be. And maybe, Bruce, we could spotlight her for a minute, and then we'll just open it up to some questions for you, if you don't mind. Does that sound okay?
That's great.
Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Britt Hartley. Let's see. I don't even know where to start. So I was raised Mormon. I would say that I lost my faith in Mormonism by the time I was around 14, 15, but I did not walk out of the building of Mormonism for another, 15 years after that. So my deconstruction and reconstruction journey has been quite long and the focus of study in my life. And so this book is really when I felt that feeling of losing, you don't just lose your beliefs when you lose your faith in Mormonism, you lose your community and your rituals and how you raise your children and your meaning and your purpose. And that was difficult at the time. It was kind of before there were podcasts and books that could have been helpful for me at the time. And so essentially this book is, okay, if I want to rebuild everything that I think was good about religion or Mormonism in a way that doesn't require me to believe things that are unbelievable. And Jean says you lose your underwear too. Yeah, you have to go shopping for new underwear too. Jean always in the peanut gallery. And so essentially the book is just how do I rebuild an entire life when the foundation of Mormonism is no longer something I can build on. And that was just, a lot of research and a lot of practice with my own life. And hopefully the tools that I found along the way were helpful to someone else on their journey too.
Yeah, I have one question. I'll start out. Are you contacted by people who are not LDS, who have read this book, who have maybe stepped away from other religions? I mean, what has been the reception from people that don't have that Mormon background?
Yeah, so I did, maybe 10 years ago, I wrote a book actually on Mormon philosophy, and I was much more involved in the Mormon community a decade ago. I, spent a long time podcasting with Bill. We podcasted for years. Together, and so there was a time where I was really focused on the Mormon community and rebuilding after the Mormon community. But after I lost not just Mormonism, but then I kept deconstructing, and once I lost Christianity and then lost my faith in God, that's when my experience opened up, where now I was relating to lots of other people leaving lots of different religions. And so this book is, I don't talk about Mormonism really at all, because it just wasn't as big of a part of my experience in the past 5 years. So I with this book, I do have a much larger non-Mormon audience than Mormon audience, but I still have, part of the Mormon community that's followed me for some time, or at least is familiar with aspects of my story that picked up the book. And so I still always feel like Mormons are my people. At Thrive yesterday, I still felt like these are my people, like these are just fundamentally my people. But for the book, it would be mostly non-Mormons, because I really don't talk, even on social media, I don't really talk about Mormonism anymore. I've just kind of moved on to bigger fish to fry.
Well, it is the rise of the nuns, as they say.
Right.
That's
yeah.
N-O-N-E-S.
So
Right?
that's more of my
Yeah.
demographic.
Yeah.
The nuns or post-religious or even ex-evangelicals, I would say I have a larger group there than just Mormons, because As much as like Mormon deconstruction is super interesting to me, and I still do a lot of coaching, I still follow a lot of it. We didn't, us Mormons didn't invent deconstruction, right? This is much bigger than us. This movement is much bigger than us. And so it's something we're a part of that is bigger than us. Yeah.
I think we forget that sometimes. So
I do
all
think
right.
I do think we think that we invented it
We're
sometimes.
the only ones. That's right. That's
Yeah.
why it's good to read books like Unorthodox to realize, oh dear, no, it's
Yeah.
everybody. All
And
right.
every
So
time I talk to a Jehovah's Witness, I feel like they had it so much worse. Like there's some
yeah,
times where it's like, oh, you guys had something
yeah.
way beyond what I
Oh my
had as a
gosh.
Mormon.
No, that's true. So we are lucky enough to have Britt probably for at least like another half an hour. I know she has clients and stuff today, maybe 40 minutes. So if we have questions, let's raise our computer hand and that'll kind of put us in order. And we'll just let Britt, if you can see somebody, Landon, raise your hand or something. So Britt can see if she can see them. And then she can just call on people and kind of run her own show here. So can you raise your hand, Landon, just so she can see if she can? Oh, there. Okay. Well, Kendall has an actual question. Here you go, Britt. Yeah. Can you see
Yeah.
Kendall? Okay, perfect. Yeah, just go ahead and call on people in order, and we'll talk to Britt. This is what we're here for.
Great. Yeah. So this is an experience combined with a question at the end. So I love the book. I was just like saying hallelujah, and that's the way it is like throughout the book. And I want to start with just thanking you for being and choosing to explicitly be so vulnerable. Like the story where you share like the time where, just because you were seeking security and order, that you were like, I'm going to put back on my garments because I just need this right now. And, when you put them on, you realize, this is not the same. I am not going back. So my first question, so thank you, first of all, for being that vulnerable and going to those places. But my first question is, in this choice to be so open, to be so vulnerable, like there's so many of your readers and fans that are scared to be that vulnerable, and they have all these good reasons in their mind not to go there and not to, be that authentic and transparent. Do you have any regrets or like things you didn't contemplate of negatives for being that way, or do you mostly just don't regret it and your advice is still just, yeah, be that authentic and transparent and don't fear the practical drawbacks and reactions of people?
Yeah, I have two thoughts that come to mind with that. First of all, thank you for your kind words. Overall, yes, I still am team vulnerability, even though sometimes you pay a social cost and people are gonna think that you're weird. But one of the benefits of losing everything and facing death and facing some of these hard things is people's words become less powerful over you because it's like, I'm suffering. I'm gonna die. Like we're all gonna be worm food in 100 years. So, the social rejection, I think for me comes a lot easier when you face some of these hard things. It's kind of a benefit. So I still am team vulnerability because so many good things in my life have come from just really sharing my experience as a human and inviting other people to say like, how are you humaning over there? And that is just the one of the best things about kind of the post-Mormon space is because we don't do that very well as Mormons. Like, here's my real vulnerable, here's the thoughts that I have, here's the dark things that I'm going through. We really struggle with that. So the friends and community I've built and also the inner peace that I have by talking about some of these things without shame. All of that is good stuff. The only thing I have to be really careful of, and I'll say this here, whenever you talk about struggles with children, this is something that mothers have to think about, is how much do we want to share when you have young children and you're a mom, your brain goes crazy. It goes a little insane. Mine certainly did. And I thought really awful things. I wished my children would die. I would fantasize about getting in a car wreck. Some pretty bad intrusive thoughts. And I don't know if it's fair for children to have to hear all of that. I have adopted kids too, and so they already have maybe some identity issues. So I would say overall, I'm team vulnerability, and it's just paid off for me over and over and over. But when it comes to struggles with motherhood, I do think that it's appropriate to filter some of that because I don't want my kids to internalize that they aren't wanted, just because I was having some of those thoughts. And so I wrestle with both of those.
Okay, that's a very, very good caveat. And then if I can insert just one more thing, because I think it'll set the tone for future ones, and then I'll give other people a chance. But I read the book 1.5 times, and I still missed this concept that I know you explained somewhere, but I just couldn't find it. But you mentioned it several times. Can you just go over real quick what you mean by like living in matrices and finding a better matrix? Like I just missed.
Yeah. Yeah, so we know that our brains don't see reality clearly. We see projections of reality and guesses, and so we're essentially seeing projections of reality, and then so we're not seeing things clearly. We're not seeing things unbiased. And so when we're raised in some kind of, to use the movie Matrix, we're essentially, our brains are built in some kind of fishbowl of what is real and what is true, and all of these things that we just breathe in when we're children. And even if you weren't raised Mormon, however you were raised, that kind of fishbowl of reality is not ultimately true in some way. It's going to be limited in some way. It's going to be biased in some way. We're not interacting with ultimate reality as much as we think we are. And so really for me, it becomes like this moment on the Truman Show where, do you want to stay in the Truman Show where you have this, this is the story, and you have this kind of God character saying like, I've created this world for you? Or do you, like Truman, we cheer for Truman when he opens the door into the darkness and takes a step into the unknown, and we cheer for Truman for that. And so really it's understanding that we're not fully seeing reality. If you look, here's a study we've done. If you take a lion and we took a lion and someone had it on a leash and walked around, and because of our brain projection models, you actually see a dog until that lion is very close. And it's not like fuzzy, like your brain constructs the picture of dog because it's guessing that thing on a leash is a dog. And it has to be really close for your brain to say, oh, actually my projection model was wrong. It's actually a lion. So we can do studies that show that we're creating reality as we're seeing it. And so,
Okay.
yeah,
so
so that aspect and how we're raised, you have to take a step outside of that to see around your own biases of reality.
Okay, so to quote you in your intro, it says, this book's purpose is to build a life from the ground up rather than the top down. The tools discussed here work regardless of what is truly going on with ultimate reality. So matrix refers to the extent to which we are approaching real reality versus living in the matrix, like the movie.
I would say we're all kind of living in a matrix just because of how little we are interacting with ultimate reality. So for example, we don't know what consciousness is. Like we really don't know. We don't know if it arises from matter or whether it's an essential part of the universe. We truly have no idea. And so the tools for the book are, hey, these tools work regardless of what is ultimately going on here, because these tools work for human well-being. So let's just focus on that. Now, how that maps on to things like consciousness, I don't know yet. I don't think anyone knows, but the tools still work anyway. So that was kind of the focus of that.
Okay, cool. I have 7 more questions, but I'll give others a chance.
Yeah, and Kendall is our presenter today, so he definitely has all his ducks in the line. That's great. So, no, I love it. I think anybody, please raise your hand. Landon, did you say that you'd curated some questions out of the chat where people were just asking? So this is your chance, everybody. Raise your hand, get in line, and we can ask Britt whatever we'd like.
Yeah, there was a couple questions in here. I'm trying to find them here. Could we ask Britt for her list of 10 red and 10 green flags from yesterday? I couldn't write fast enough.
Do you want me to email it or do you want me to like say them?
Maybe you can
She-
talk about what that meant a little bit. That was really good.
Yeah, they
Okay.
said a link or a doc or whatever is
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
So they would like a document, but yeah, if you could talk about them so that those that weren't there know
Yeah,
about
I'll do
that.
it. I'll do it super short. So yesterday I did 10 red flags that I'm seeing in the post deconstruction world and 10 green flags. So my 10 red flags are opening your marriage too soon, not providing enough order and structure for kids, psychedelics chasing, clinging to new beliefs, going into a missionary phase, not recognizing the good in religion, setting unrealistic expectations for growth, underestimating that deconstruction is a lifelong process, finding new prophets, overemphasis on intellectualism. Anyway, if you just email me, I actually have an hour. I prepared for an hour. I thought I was going to be talking for an hour. So I condensed it down into 20 minutes, which was why I was kind of like flying through these because I had to condense it down from an hour. So if you want, I have a document that is like the hour that I did on the 10 red flags and 10 green flags. So if you want that, I'm happy to just email it to you. So just email me at nnspirituality@gmail.com and I'll be happy to email you that full document so that I don't take up all your time reading that.
And I'll get a copy of that from you too. I'll email and then I'll
Yeah.
put that over on the Good Book Club so we can access it there
Okay.
too. Because
Yeah.
that's wow. To find
I'll
out there
send
was
you the
more.
full. There was so much more. There was so much more. I had to really fly through it.
Oh,
If I would have known I would have been speaking for 20 minutes, I might have done something else. But
right.
if you want the full document for that, I'll send it to Rebecca so that you guys have it.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Britt. I think now some hands are starting to raise. You can just go ahead and
David looks like I see.
Pretty common name. I hope you're referring to me.
Yep, you're
Yep.
it.
Hi, Britt. Hey, like my predecessor, really appreciate your book.
Thank you.
And to my surprise, a chapter that jumped out at me was chapter 10, the chapter about mysticism, which I probably have the most to learn about. But there was a sentence in the chapter that I wanted to ask you about.
I'm so curious. I'm on the edge of my seat. Like, what did I say?
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I don't know if I stand by it. Well, yeah, what do I say? I
Yeah,
talk a lot.
yeah. Well, just to the sentence before it reads, "We can't blame people for only turning to God or gods when they have a meaningful experience. If the only place where that experience is taken seriously is in the local religion." I get that. Next sentence. "We must separate what is profound and awe-inspiring from the tendency to need a God or a universal energy to explain such things." And I was a little provoked by your including "or a universal energy." What could you help me understand, and maybe the others understand, what does that mean to you, a universal energy? And if you need more from me, I could give you an example of why I'm provoked by that.
Energy is a really tricky word. A lot of these words, like even just the God word is just really tricky. The energy world in the spiritual space is just as tricky. Like if you ask someone to explain what they mean by energy, people who are spiritual, you're going to get as many different answers as you do if you ask people the God question. It's a very tricky word because on the one hand, we have a lot of science saying like, hey, there's just lots of energy patterns going on. And also, when you hear someone in the spiritual space use the word energy, 9 times out of 10, you're going to hear some like pseudoscience bullshit, in my point of view, right? This is my story, so it's my point of view. So what I'm afraid of for New Age spirituality is that often they drop the God. They certainly drop the Old Testament God. But then they replace it with things like source and energy and maybe reincarnation words. And there's lots of other words that they plug in there. And my concern for that is that often it's making the same truth claims that we just don't have enough information on. We don't know what consciousness is for, like we don't know enough to know, if consciousness is an inherent part of the universe, then we'd have enough information to say something like universal energy or even universal consciousness. Like we could start using words like that. but we just don't have enough information. And so my approach is still always, can we value the experience? Can we value these tools without having to play truth claim games that we're just not good enough at yet, because we just don't know enough about ultimate reality? And so I'm tentative about using words like source and energy. I'm tentative about using astrology. I'm tentative about a lot of these other places because they require some truth claims. And I'm pretty, as an ex-Mormon, one of the benefits, I think, is that I'm pretty truth claim allergic. And so I just like, give me the tool, give me the experience. But if you're trying to tell me because of this, then source is a thing and energy is a thing, and then reincarnation is a thing because energy doesn't. Okay, those are a lot of truth claims. I don't want to play that game unless we know more. And right now we don't know enough to make some claims in that space other than like guesses. Like if you want to play the guess game, I'll talk about that all day. But if we're making truth claims, I think we should do that very hesitantly because we're just historically bad at that game as humans.
May I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So yesterday, Michelle and I, this is Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
We were at the Thrive conference, and we were there for the beginning. Someone in the group already mentioned at the very beginning of the conference, someone came onto the stage and led a meditation session. And sure enough, for some people, it was a little bit much, and for others, they got into it. And I had never had an experience like that before. I'd never had that type of guided meditation. To my total surprise. And I found myself, I got really into it. And afterward, I met with the person who led the meditation, and I told her the feelings I had are the same feelings I used to say I had when I used to say, I feel the spirit. The exact same feeling. Had that. Chapter 10 about mysticism, and I'm finding that the feeling that I used to call the spirit, I've now experienced in two very different situations. So I'm wondering, and now we may be getting down to semantics, definitions, but in your mind, is mysticism at play here?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I want to back up for a second, mysticism is, in my experience, and John Ogden, I'd be curious if he would define it differently. I see him in the group. Mysticism, in my experience with the work that I've done with my Sufi teacher, is valuing the experience of what you just said without having to put a box around it and say, for Mormons, it would be, this is the God, we have the fullness of the spirit, this is the story. Like, we put a box around that experience, right? And even sometimes in New Age spaces, we start to put definitions and rituals, and this is the only way, and good vibes only. Like, we start to just put a box around it. And mysticism is more about, I don't care what language you put around this experience. I don't care from what tradition it comes from. I just want you to feel this. I just want you to experience what you experienced yesterday. And here are all the ways that humans can experience it. Come and experience this with us. That's what we get from the wisdom traditions. And it usually passes from teacher to student rather than an organized religion with a book and dogma and rules. Mystic traditions usually pass student to teacher, and it's this invitational, you can learn how to feel this more often in your life. And so for me, the mystic experience that you talked about yesterday, where you probably felt connected to something bigger than you because it was very connective with the group. Some elevation, maybe transcendence. There's lots of words that we could use for what you experienced yesterday. But for me, learning more about that and how I, as a human, access that in my life, those experiences have like 100 times increased since leaving Mormonism, that feeling the spirit. And so now it's something, I would say it's more of a daily experience for me, little blips of that feeling of just awe and transcendence and presence, and that you're that it's just amazing to be alive. Um, Mystics will help you to essentially find ways to shortcut into that. For some people, it's the breath and meditation. There's lots of other paths for how to have that be a more regular part of your life.
It was wonderful. Thank you, Britt.
Yeah, my pleasure. John, my friend, I'm so curious as to what your question is, because you're just such a hero of mine. So John Ogden, what's your question?
Thanks, Britt. Likewise. My question actually fits well with what you're just talking about, which is the mystics are, I would agree with your definition, and yet they don't have a system or an organization that helps people with like collective ritual. That's more the dogma that gets sneered at, often rightly so, by people who have left religion. And yet without the collective ritual, there's like an emptiness. And so I'm curious, is there any truth claim that you feel could be close enough, viable enough to be able to hold, so that then you can get to collective ritual? And what might that truth claim look like, if so?
It's such a good question. It's a question that I would love to like go get dinner and talk about for like 3 hours, because I would love to hear your thoughts on this too. I tend to I talk about this question a lot with other people, especially the people who are like, can we build something like secular church? And of course, Uplift Kids is very interested in that conversation, and I think a big piece of that. But my view is a little bit more pessimistic, which is that as soon as we get even a truth claim that we can stand behind, even the people who say like, let's make up a God and let's make up rituals, and we'll just say from the outset, hey, this is make believe, but we're going to participate in it because it's good for us. Even the churches that I've seen and the organizations that I've seen do that, they either become a cult because someone says, actually, this is real, or it's just not sticky enough and it fails anyway. So I have a pretty pessimistic view about our ability to do this without culting. I don't think it's possible. I think the harsh reality that we're seeing in the secular space is we either cult too much or too little as far as organizations. And I don't see a lot who are doing, a good amount of culting where you have something uniting that isn't turning into a cult. It's just so easy to go in that direction. So I tend to think that the best way to do this, and John Vervaeke, who talks about the meaning crisis a lot, agrees with me. He says, I think the best way to do this is from the individual up. And his example for that is meditation, that a lot of people started doing individual meditation. And then because it was so good, we started to see it seep into society. And then we start to see schools that will offer, because having meditation in schools like raises a lot of, we have data that shows that it's really good for kids. Doing meditation in prisons, fantastic for controlling violence. So the meditation movement, even though there are groups that will do meditation, it was much more of an individual thing, especially with apps, that he sees that it was actually better that individuals were doing this, and then it was seeping into society from the ground up rather than some kind of top-down movement. And we saw some of those meditation kind of groups, the culty ones, and they either got really culty and really gross and blew up, and there's tons of Netflix documentaries on those, or they just kind of fizzled. And so I think the from the individual up is the only way that we're going to be able to do this. Yeah. So I focus more on the individual. I think John Vervaeke does that too. I think Nietzsche does that too, where you have to, the Ubermensch, that someone who's living according to their own values, that's more individual ground up rather than top down. If we do top down, even with our best intentions, it seems to turn into a cult anyway. So far, Uplift Kids hasn't. So that's what I mean. So far, there's no weird sex cult thing happening at Uplift Kids parent retreats. So if anything, Uplift Kids is the one that I'm watching the most and most proud to support. So
Oh, thanks,
Yep,
Britt.
John is awesome. We applaud John. Can you see Cameron's hand raised up there, Britt? I don't know if you
Yeah,
can see
Cameron, go
everybody's-
ahead.
Okay, good. I just want to
Okay,
make sure.
awesome. Thank you, Britt. Thank you, everyone. I feel like your book is written directly towards people like me. And so I just want to thank you for that. I love your TikTok and everything. But so just quickly, post my deconstruction of God and religion, I felt like I was triggered every time religious language was used. So even the word spirituality, really triggering for me, God, those kinds of words. And I still attend church, by the way. So I'm kind of a weird enigma. But in the last year, I've been leaning into finding things that I do that I feel good about, calling them spiritual practices, like running. I love to run, and now I call running my spiritual practice, or going
Love
to
it.
a concert, or lots of different things that I do, gardening in my garden, like all these things. I'm now calling them spiritual practice. So thank you for your book; it's helping me. But I have a ways to go still, and so one thing that I find myself triggered on still, as far as the tools that you mentioned in the book, things like astrology or tarot or crystals, or I really dislike pseudoscience around medicine. I'm a very skeptical, science-oriented person, and so I find myself being very biased towards anything like that. And even though I know that there is some probably good that comes out of those, I like my bias is, oh, there should be some Surgeon General warning on all this stuff because it's so you can get down the rabbit hole and you can like believe in all kind of pseudoscience crap around it, and it can really hurt you. And so any suggestions that you would have for a person like me that doesn't want to be biased fully against this stuff and think of it as woo and think the people that use it are, weird or crazy or, not smart. I don't want to have that kind of negative bias about it all, but I also want to not like get pulled down the rabbit hole in any of it. Now, I probably won't try any of that myself. But I just don't want to be biased against people that do use it in a negative way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so for me, I would say right after Mormonism, I was the same way. Like I couldn't touch all of the tarot stuff that the kids were doing. But as a spiritual director, like I need to understand what people are getting out of this. Like so I wanted to understand it more, and I spent a few years really digging into it. And the thing that I had to really humble myself on is, even though from like a Richard Dawkins point of view, it can be just all woo bullshit. When I actually started to really look at this, if someone did, let's say, a guided meditation where they're talking to a hero of theirs, like they're imagining a hero, doesn't have to be a real person, Gandalf, Dumbledore, whatever it is. And so they're imagining that person, they ask that person a question, their subconscious wisdom projected onto that person starts talking back to them. They actually make a decision, they make a decision about something in their life, and they feel better about it, and now they're off making that decision. And if you were a rational person and said, well, that's woo-woo because I'm not talking to Dumbledore because that's not real, you actually missed an experience that helped that person to make a decision because they were having a conversation between their conscious and subconscious mind. So where rational people will sometimes the rationality can become a crutch or sometimes even a barrier to growth is if you are only working from your rational mind. How are you accessing your intuition, your feelings, your body, your irrationality, your shadow, your pettiness? Like there's a lot of you going on in your brain that is not rational. And so if you only stay from rationality because that feels safe, then it's almost like when you're Mormon, you have to shut down the rational part of your brain, and then you're ex-Mormon, and then you try to stay super rational, and then you shut down the emotional or intuitive part of your brain. And both are not whole. Both are not all of what you are or all the wisdom that you have in your subconscious that you can access. And so the people who are daily flipping tarot cards and asking, what do I need to let go of in order to move on with my life? Like they're just daily asking themselves these personal questions. It's that they're having a conversation within that can genuinely help their life in ways that sometimes rational people miss out on. And so the trick for me is, how can I use these tools and play this game what are ways that I can access my own subconscious and support those conversations? And also, don't give me any truth claims. This is why I prefer tarot to astrology. For tarot, you just flip over a card. It doesn't necessarily mean anything other than for some people, working with the symbolism helps their subconscious to speak, and they get a lot out of that. For astrology, it requires truth claims. You have to believe that the universe affects human personality. And we have done so many science experiments on this, and we have nothing that shows that that is in any way true. So there are some things that I think are better than others. I tend towards mythology and writing and meditation and guided meditations and art and symbolism, even tarot. I prefer some of those over to like astrology, where there's just like a lot of cognitive bias and a lot of truth claims that get in there. So I think we should be open to, hey, there are tools here that helps us to access our subconscious. Can we use those tools without, you don't have to believe that the universe spun in such a way that that tarot card is the only card you could have gotten today. We don't have to believe that in order for you to get a benefit from doing some symbolic work, some symbolic inner work. That's all it is, at least to me. So I think there's good tools there. And I think that allergy to truth claims is a good thing that keeps us safe. But I do think that there are tools here that sometimes rational people miss out on because they're not having that conversation with the rest of their brain. If that makes sense. All right,
we have
Bruce.
time for one more. Yeah, with Bruce.
I maybe have two more, but yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Britt has something to do pretty soon here. So
Yeah, just my comment on finding community. I live in Southern California, and I've been part of a community that I describe as a functioning church community without religion, but it's geared towards seniors. It's the village. Started in Boston about 20 years ago. Our village has been around for 10 years. We've got 220 people, and it's all member led. We do have the dues and stuff are pretty expensive. We have 3 full-time staff, but
wow.
I lead the men's brunch. The old guys want to go to the golf course and have brunch. That's the extent of it. I do an Apple support group, but it is kind of a nice model, but it is seniors, and our group is heavily a retired Caltech scientists, USC scientists, therapists, teachers. But I found this little community, and I'm involved across the country with it. There's about 300 villages across the country.
Mm-hmm.
But I keep thinking, geez, if you could do this concept for other than old people who.
Yeah. That's the issue. That's the issue. So like I've seen there's various things like this. And there's women's groups that have like the same thing, and it's across the country, and there's individuals in the area who are kind of heading it up. The issue that we come across is as soon as you start adding kids and families, that's when it starts getting really tricky. The same thing with post-Mormon groups. There's lots of great post-Mormon groups. Mormon spectrum groups are across the country with individuals who are running Mormon spectrum groups in their individual cities. I run one in Boise. But is it actually something that's going to pass on to the kids, to our children? No, there's nothing holding these kids together. Like we as adults have something holding us together. We have some shared desires or some shared social goals or some shared experiences, maybe shared ages. But is this something that's going to pass, parent to child, multi-generational? Probably not. And so that's what I'm seeing is that, yes, things like the Village or women's groups or Mormon spectrum groups, I think that they're fantastic. I think they're totally possible. I think that there's some good models of people doing it really well. It sounds like yours is functioning. When you're able to get money to keep it sustainable, that's something that you have to do. So the fact that you've been able to bridge that is fantastic. The issue is when we want to do something bigger than that, where we start to have families, we want it to pass to the next generation. That part is the tricky part. We don't quite know how to do that without shared myths and bigger cults and bigger dogma.
I ran a Mormon spectrum group in Southern California for years, and we did beach parties with all the exes, the ex
Mm,
witness, and we ran it for 8 years. But yeah, there's nothing in common. I mean, you get
yeah.
together and you complain about,
Hmm.
witnesses and the Orthodox Jews, and we sit
Yeah.
for a day.
And we do trauma bonding, and trauma bonding has a limit. It's 10 years. You cannot have a trauma bonding group longer than 10 years.
But
So
all
my Boise group is coming up on 10, and it's fizzling. It is fizzling, my Boise group.
and all the kids that come, they have no idea what their parents are talking about because they weren't in the religion,
Yeah.
and so they're
Yeah.
supposed to play at the beach.
And I don't know, I really don't know how to do that other than big religions. I do think that the only way we have to do that is from the ground up, that if we give people access to tools, then they can build that in their own life. So the parents have community and the kids are getting community from their karate and their Girl Scouts or whatever they're doing. I do think that individuals can build it and local groups can build it. As far as like bigger movements, I don't see that happening without it being a cult. And that's a hard thing to learn about ourselves and human nature, that we don't seem to be able to do something good for us without, threats of hell and the other things that go along with some of these bigger movements. But locally, and what you're doing and people running it and having specific demographics, there are lots of groups that are doing that really well, and it sounds like you're a part of that, and that's fantastic. I just don't know how to blow that up without it being a cult, and so it may just always be an individual thing, providing tools for individual families. Same thing with Uplift Kids. I use Uplift Kids a lot with my own home. Once in a while, I'll go to retreat and I'll do a retreat with my kids, but it's not something that I'm doing every Sunday with other families. You know what I mean? That's harder to do. That's harder to do. It takes money and resources, and money and resources require dogma. And so I don't know how to, that's the big question in the secular space. We don't quite know how to deal with that. Maybe if enough people, get disenfranchised with religion, that eventually we'll just start building it into society, and maybe necessity becomes the mother of invention. But it is the problem of secularism. We don't know how to solve that problem yet.
Yep. How are you in time, Britt? Do you need to
I
leave
got
us
time
now?
for one more.
She's
This is
got
so
time
fun.
for one now. There you go.
It's
Somebody else.
such a
Somebody else.
it's such an ego boost to
Yeah.
just like, let
We
me
love
tell
you,
you what I
Britt.
think about these things. Yeah,
We're
these
ready
are
to
just
turn the Good Book Club
this
into
is
a cult and
this
follow
is
you.
yeah, this is not
That's
a
how
cult.
much we
This is
love
not
you.
gospel. This is not, don't write this down. I'll probably change my mind next week, but I love just spouting on these things because
I
these
love
are
it. Oh,
things that I
perfect,
think
Kendall.
about.
All right, our
All right,
presenter. Why don't
Kendall.
you ask the
Yeah,
last question,
bring
and
us
then we
home.
can let
Yeah,
Brittany.
I have to choose really carefully between my 7, but just because it's come up so many times, I'll choose this one. So, in your experience in all your work with people, what are the biggest mental differentiators that show someone has deculted their brain well, like their beliefs, their internal dialogues, the way they react to things like that? Like what are the micro skills and mental maps that they've developed?
Yeah, that's a really big question. It's one of those things that like in the middle of the night, I'll be like, oh, that's how I should have answered it. All right. I would say a big sign that I see where a lot of positive growth has been made is the day when you can, and I would say for most people, it's a 10-year journey. Not always, but I've talked about this with John Dehlin and some other people. It seems to be about a decade circle where you can walk back into a church, into a Mormon church, and deeply understand and feel love for everybody at the pulpit and what they're saying. And because you've done enough understanding of human development that you understand, like we were talking about, was it David? We were talking about feeling the spirit, and you understand, oh, yeah, I feel it too when I'm singing with these people. I don't call it the same word, but I understand what they're getting out of this. And when you listen to someone talk, you understand that the reason that they're believing that is because they're afraid of death. I'm afraid of death too. I feel deeply connected to this person talking, even though they're talking about beliefs that are just like so insane to me, right? Like some of these testimony meetings are wild theologically, right? Just from theology brain. But when you can go back into a church building and you deeply understand why people are doing what they're doing, and you see some beauty in it, and you feel deeply connected to these people, and not just that like you're an alien in a different planet and like that kind of thing. I would say that's when I know that incredible human growth and development has happened, because you understand these people and you can relate to them, because whatever they're doing is being driven by human desires and human needs that you have too. And when you can connect to that underneath kind of the belief of what they're saying, that's when I know you've grown a lot. You've really deeply understand human nature better. And so I would say check in with how you are when you walk, when it's Christmas or whatever, the baptism, you find yourself walking back into a ward building. If you still feel like an alien and everything's making you angry, there's still some stuff you need to go through and process. If you feel like I deeply understand and love these people, that's when I know that would be a sign of some serious growth has happened. And usually that cycle, in my experience, takes about 10 years.
And how does that relate to being resistant to cult control? Like I'm getting the answer that like you're not worried about us versus them. You're wanting to connect, but how is that like a resistance to further manipulation? Because couldn't that be used to be like, oh, everything everyone does is great, and I love everyone?
It's because you deeply understand what cults are doing to the brain. And so for something like feeling the spirit, if you understand that that's a normal human experience, especially when we sing together to have this feeling, and then you understand if you put a name on it and call it the spirit, and you say, in order to access this, you need to be doing XYZ, then you can see how the cult got placed on top of human experience. And so once you understand that, then you're able to deeply love and connect with people, because you see that the beliefs and some of the dogma and the weird things that they do, oh, that's the cult part that's been put on top of human experience.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So it's an ability to decouple the good from the bad, and have empathy for the foundation that is good.
Yes. And why then they would have that belief, because if you have the spirit, if you have that feeling, and it's around the Book of Mormon being true, I understand why people would feel that the Book of Mormon is true, right? Because I understand the steps that it would take to get there. And then I understand why they're having to defend the historicity of the Book of Mormon, even though it's insane, right? So that just leads to deeper understanding of how human experience can turn into cult brain. And you can actually then separate the two and appreciate the human underneath the cult.
Oh my gosh, Britt, you are blowing my mind, because that goes one step further, where you can have sympathy for the why of why people do harmful or irrational things. Like they are seeking for something that's good, and we can have compassion.
And they're and even in politics, like if I think it was something, the study came out that half of Americans believe that the other side of the aisle is evil. And that's cult brain stuff, right? And when you actually dig into it, you could do the same thing with politics. People are afraid of the other side on both sides. And so if we understand that, then we can understand the reason that they're doing this is the same on both sides. They're scared of something. Something is scaring them, right?
Yeah, that's asking a lot of us, Britt, but
it's asking a lot of us right now. Right now we have a lot of feelings. But when you can go back and see the human under the politics and see the human under the cult and deeply relate to it and even have compassion for it, I would say that's a pretty big sign of some serious human development.
Cool. I'm on board. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Britt. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. We loved your book. We're going to talk about it for another hour now, so I'll let you know how it goes. And
anytime
I'll reach out via email.
You want to just scratch my ego and ask me questions.
No.
Thank you, everyone. Wonderful. Thank you for your support with the book. I really didn't know if a single person would read it. I self-published it. I didn't do it with a publishing company. That's why there's so many errors in the book. So I just appreciate that it resonated with someone because I wrote it really for me, and so I'm glad if it helped you at all. I'm really glad for that. So thank you, everyone. I gotta hop on with a client.
Thank you,
so
Britt. Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
All right. That was excellent. Kendall, I want to do one quick thing. I need to ask John a question really fast before we go to you. Because Britt mentioned a lot, uplift kids. And I don't know if everybody knows what that is. John, would you be comfortable just for a second? Because Britt is so adamant about how important this program is. And I podcasted about this with John a while ago. It's a really important program. And I don't know if all you guys know what this is. Are you okay talking about it for 1 second, John? Just since I kind of segue out of what Britt was saying.
Sure. Yeah, it's just a lesson library and curriculum for families to use. And we are asking the questions that Britt's asking. I mean, I feel very at home with what she's proposing, and like the wrestle. How do we help kids have values when you've moved beyond a traditional worldview?
Yeah. And so it's a whole, how can people access you? Because to me, this is so important. I mentioned this when we podcasted before, because I had a son who stepped away when he was 15. And at that point, I didn't know that I should do something else for him. Show him a spiritual path, introduce him to other things. I just kind of let him flounder. And today's his birthday. He's still floundering. Unfortunately, I had nothing to replace Mormonism with. I thought, okay, he won't have to go anymore. I'll rescue him in that way. But then there was nothing at all. I know so much better now. And that's why I love to promote things like Uplift, because, it's definitely a curriculum to provide something for kids and families. So how can people find you really quick?
Yeah, upliftkids.org. And we're not under any presumption that we are the answer. It might not fit, and we totally understand that. But yeah, if it's a good fit, you can check it out, upliftkids.org.
Yeah, and Britt loves it. So that's a pretty good endorsement right there. So, all right. Yes, Bruce. Oh, you're muted, Bruce.
Yeah, just to let everybody know, because we have so many new people. A few people, I've turned off your video because it was becoming distracting during the conversation, but you have to message me and I can ask you to turn it back on. Once I turn it off for you, you can raise your hand and participate, but your video won't come back on unless you in the chat message me to turn it back on.
So they can't turn it back on themselves.
No.
Okay. Oh, you are omnipotent and omnipresent, Bruce. There you go. So, all right. So that was so wonderful to have Britt here. And our presenter today is Kendall. So now we're just going to move on to kind of more discussion, more presentation about the book, because there's so much to talk about. We probably could have talked to her for 4 or 5 hours. And for those of you that are also new, let's go back a little, so we're not going to our final slide yet. So we're just going to go to Kendall for the next hour. So at the end of our discussion, we actually do turn off our recording and we kind of have a mix and mingle where we all just, stay on and get to know each other and talk to each other. So, but right now we'll let Kendall kind of take it away and lead a little bit of a further discussion. And then we'll move into our final slides and mix and mingle after that.
All right. Yeah. So this is a little different than what I usually do. I just have my favorite quotes in a haphazard kind of way, and I'm trying to organize it by relevance. So I'll start off with David's question and comment. I had the same experience where the chapter about mysticism was just really resonant. So this comes from this chapter. She says, quote, "My connection to mysticism is through my Sufi teacher. Sufism being the mystic branch of Islam. It can surprise many people that I can be very tough on Abrahamic religions, tough on bad ideas, tough on theocracy, tough on Islam, and yet dance the whirling dervish with Sufis without any cognitive dissonance. Sufis don't care that I call God collective consciousness, or what is, or the ground of being, or these other terms that feel more authentic to me than the word God, who was first presented to me as a kind of Santa Claus in the sky. What matters to mystics is not what you call spiritual experience, but that you experience it. It doesn't matter what you call love, but that you feel it. Each religion has a different name for it, but there's always a name for encompassing love of all creation and wishing well for all creatures. It doesn't matter what you call unity, whether it be Christ consciousness, nirvana, the Tao, one mind, or if you experience it through psychedelics. mysticism doesn't dictate the way, only emphasizing the value in the experience of it. I just thought that was mind-blowing. Like, it's true. Like, my whole life, I was very concerned about names and doing things the right way and like getting to the right conclusion. And there's another option where I don't have to care about the process. I can just value that I went through the experience. Like, this is going to be a very like fertile ground for me for growth. Just that offering that new way of thinking. I don't know if anyone else had a similar experience as David and I, or has a comment about this. Okay, then my next section of quotes is kind of like, oh, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. So I grew up Mormon in Chicago, where I was the only Mormon. I went to a Catholic school where I learned about, like, for the non-Catholics, we had a basically intro to all different kinds of spirituality. So in 6th grade, I'm learning about Islam as a fully like respected religion and all these other groups. And I had like Episcopalian and Jewish friends. And I think that kind of exposure so early on helped me. I don't feel like I ever really got fully bought in. I served a mission. I taught in the MTC. I got married in the temple, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't feel like I ever was fully bought in on this idea that there is only one way to do things and it has to fit in this box. That always kind of, it just didn't quite sit right with me and made me feel like, man, I don't know. All these other people are getting up on Sunday and saying, I know, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, that's my tidbit.
Okay, and then yeah, thank you for that, because I was looking for one more of my favorite mystic quotes. So this is from near the end of the book. She says, all religions have their roots in mysticism or a mystic experience. They all have wells that reach down into those waters. What happens, though, is someone has a mystical experience, insight, or connection and begins to tell others. Then a clubhouse is made around that with rituals, narratives, prophets, power, money, sacrifice, and identity markers. Without fail, the structure built becomes corrupt sooner or later and will then look to protect itself at all costs. I mean, how helpful is this to view the actions of the LDS Church through this lens? The people then suffer, become hungry again for something meaningful, and then a new person has an experience, and then the process starts all over again. So yeah, anyway, any comments or reactions to that quote? Okay. Then I'll just go through again. This next section is kind of similar to that, where I just collected some things where she, kind of talks about my religion of my birth, Mormonism, and just some validating things. So she says, quote, awe is just about the last thing one feels in church. In my native religion, church buildings are all the same carpet, the same stock photos on the wall, long bereft of any true creativity or expression of authenticity. Every Sunday school lesson is not a place of real discussion. It is simply a call and response ritual where a question is asked by a teacher and the usual answer is given by the audience in an attempt to make us feel safe or even superior. Most words over the pulpit today in America are political, hypocritical, prosperity gospel driven, us versus them, apocalyptic garbage, which is hilarious because how you get that from a radical homeless man named Jesus is a testament to human idiocy. Oh, I just got so much validation from this and other quotes. And then let me read one more that's in this same kind of section of how I organize my quotes. But anyone can raise their hand. Okay, Landon, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say,
just so you guys know, my client canceled, so I'm back if you guys will have me.
Wait, what?
Please. Yeah, absolutely.
We need to take a vote. Let's see. Do we? Oh, come on.
If you want to talk smack behind my back about things that could have done better, that's okay too.
That's right. That's what we were doing. Oh, that Britt. No,
Yeah.
no. We talked to John about Uplift Kids, and
If
Kendall
you'll
was going
have
through
me,
a couple
I would
quotes.
love to come back. Yeah.
Yes.
No,
Oh
you
my
guys
gosh,
keep talking,
let's do
but
it. Yep. Kendall, you can go through the rest of your questions. So Landon, let's make your comment and maybe morph that into a question for Britt, and let's go. Let's keep going.
Yeah, I can do my quotes anytime, but I can't ask these questions. Okay, so I'll just go through my list.
That's
Number
right.
one.
That's it. Landon, why don't you do your comment real quick, and
ahead,
then you can ask your question, and then we'll just, and I think Jackie's next, and then we'll hit Kendall.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that last quote. I saw a lot of people laughing in agreement on some of the idiocy. And just recently, I know we just posted something about this on Mormonish, but Fruit Heights, which is a city right, I grew up right next to Fruit Heights in Kaysville, but both Kaysville and Fruit Heights, the county put out a call for a warming center. And they put out the call to the churches, and the LDS church said, well, you can't use our buildings, but we'll provide blankets and food stuff. Well, a church in Fruit Heights stepped up and said, well, you can use our building. And the people of Fruit Heights, this is 80% LDS community, that they freaked out. They went to the city. It was an overflow city meeting. Kaysville ended up doing the same thing, and they said it would be a cold day in hell before there was a homeless shelter in their city. And these aren't homeless shelters. They're just warming centers. Only on when a cold blue is called that they bring these people in. And to see the reaction and the ability of the church to because we all have been there that are Mormons, that telephone tree goes and all of a sudden everybody's at the meeting, to vote this down or whatever. And we even checked on the people who were the leaders, and they were LDS leaders in the LDS wards. And to shut down something like a warming center that is exactly what the homeless preacher that you just talked about taught, is these are the people we're supposed to be helping. But you compare that to if they'd announced a temple in Fruit Heights, they would have overturned every governing law, every rule, anything to accommodate the temple of the Lord, but they wouldn't do anything to help homeless people who might be cold on a winter's night. And it just, what that quote that you just said, that just made me think of it. It's like you're looking completely past the purpose of the church and the gospel and the spirituality.
Reminds me of a scripture about straining at a gnat and swallowing a camel. I wonder who said that.
There's a similar thing in Phoenix, Arizona. So the whole city, if you go to a certain area, they'll bus you for free to a church. Well, they'll give you a meal and let you stay overnight. And the churches take turns, and all the churches in Phoenix participate in this program, so that if you do just need a meal and a place to stay, there's one place where you can go and be bused to a church that participates, and every single church in Phoenix participates except for Mormons.
Wow, that is so telling. Okay, well, my next quote in this section is
hold on, let's let Jackie ask her question. She had her hand up. We'll just kind of turn this now, Kendall, into like questions, and then you can throw your question in, and let's do that. Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, sounds good.
Hi, Britt. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your amazing work in your book. I can't tell you how much it's helped me. And I just need kind of a really quick fix, maybe a couple of quick tips. I've really gone down with the Donald Trump, cult winning this election, and I'm having massive panic attacks. I had nightmares. I'm waking up with them. And could you give us some tools? Because, I've got half my family in this group, and, there's a part of me that just wants to cut all ties. And that's ridiculous, but I've got to have some tools to cope with this situation. I'm on a news fast right now.
Yeah, that's the first thing. So some of that, like if you're having trauma responses, I can't fully speak to, because I'm not a therapist, and I'm not a trauma-informed therapist. So some of that, as far as how that's showing up in your body, is going to be a question that's beyond me. But the thing, as far as my space, where that would show up, is especially doing what we call shadow work through others. And so one of the best places to do shadow work so the shadow is the part of you that you don't usually see. So it's the part of you that you're most ashamed of. It's your fears. It's everything that you repress. It's just the part of you that you would be ashamed to have kind of said out loud. So what happens when we get triggered is when we feel like we're in a safe enough place to do it. And that might not be yet. Maybe right now your body just needs some protection and needs some boundaries. Maybe that is genuinely what you need right now because you need to have your own back and be able to feel safe. But if the panic attacks and you feel like you're in a good place and that calms down, it can be really helpful to work with the triggers by doing shadow work. And what that looks like is whenever we are triggered by something, we are only triggered by behaviors that we recognize. So if someone is doing something that we don't recognize, like we just don't understand this behavior at all, we're actually not triggered by it because we just don't understand it. And so we're only actually triggered by things that we understand, probably because we do too. And so when we get down to it, we can understand that, okay, why did people vote for a person like this when so obviously like the morality is just such a concern. And when you really get down into it and when you talk to voters, it can be economy, but also it's fear. And we have this deep fear as humans. And right now we can appreciate that the world is scary. And there's aspects of the left, the political left, that can be scary. There's aspects of deconstruction and deconstructing all of our institutions at once that is scary. There's aspects to changing your way of life that can be really scary. And what we do as humans when we feel scared is we want a bully on our side. We do the same thing with God. When things are really scary, we want a strong, badass warrior God. That's what we create when times are scary. And when times are politically scary, we want to give our lunch money to the bully that will be on our side. And that actually helps us to feel safe. And so when you understand that these people are not fundamentally different, they're not aliens. They may not even be what we would call bad people. If we look at them as these are scared little children who are seeing that by giving their lunch money to a bully, they feel safer because the world is feeling very scary right now. And that part I can understand. Like I can understand. And there's aspects of the left that are scary because like it can become, quite insane, some of the things that happens on the left. And I say that as someone who's left leaning. So I think when we get down to seeing that people are not fundamentally different, and when we can actually do the work to say, what are they, what is it that they're triggering in me? Oh, they're triggering that they're acting from a place of fear. Have I ever acted from a place of fear? Yes. Am I still sometimes acting from a place of fear? Are there beliefs that I hold maybe that are driven from a place of fear? Maybe, yeah. And so when we do that work, we see, oh, you're not different from me. I do the same things you do. I sometimes act out of fear. I sometimes hold on to things out of fear. I sometimes listen to people because they're talking about something that I'm afraid of, but they give me a lot of comfort. So when we get to that level, that's when we start to see, oh, I'm human in the same way that they're human. We're just humaning, like how that looks on paper is different, but at the root, there's something really similar going on that we can speak to. And then actually we can start to build bridges so that we don't feel like half of the country is evil or that my family hates, gay people and people of color and apparently doesn't care about morality at all. It's really easy to make those statements. It's much actually harder to get down to the root of it. Why are they doing what they're doing? Because when you get to that level, you'll see that they're doing something that you do too. And then maybe you can still have a relationship with these people that voted differently from you.
Well, love it. Thank you. Thank you. What's an example of a bridge? A couple of examples of how to do the bridge. That I just really was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's see. So I'll do one in a religious context. That's an example that comes up more easily for me. So if I'm trying to bridge a gap, I'm an atheist and I have a lot of Mormon family and I'm trying to make a bridge here where we understand each other and we can relate to each other, even though that we're different. If I come into a family Thanksgiving and say Joseph Smith is a pedophile, and I just go off on a rant, that is actually saying that, like, you are so different from me. We are aliens. You're a terrible person for being Mormon. And that's just going to blow up our relationship, right? We could do that and it'll blow up the relationship. Or I could say something like, I really love, like, Mom and Dad, I really value that I was raised Mormon. I got so much out of studying the parables of Jesus. And for me right now, when I look at marginalized people in the church and I hear the stories of people of color, I hear the stories of our queer kids who commit suicide. For me, because of how much I value what you taught me about Jesus, I feel like I'm following Jesus now by being outside of the church, at least for now, because then that helps me to reach out to those people that I feel like Jesus would have been in the trenches for. And that's how I'm following Jesus now. Now, though, neither of those were a lie, right? But one of those is going to be able to have a relationship. Now we have some shared language. Now I'm not confronting things that they hold sacred that actually maybe are sacred. There's some very beautiful things about Jesus. And now we're building a bridge where they feel like I'm not attacking things that are sacred. And I feel like I'm still honest. That is how I follow Jesus now. Like, none of that was a lie. And now we can relate to each other and build a bridge, even though it's an atheist and a Mormon on paper. And so the better that we get about calming down people's defense mechanisms, we can actually build bridges to how they're humaning, because we're humaning too. And that is going to be deeper and more understandable and more relatable than the differences on paper, because at root level, we're human. And if you had the same brain and education and experience as them, you may be a Trump voter too, right? So it's, I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So when we get to that level, now we can start building bridges by using common language and calming down that defense mechanism and getting to trying to understand each other at a deeper level.
So appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Jennifer Walden. What's up, girl?
Hi. I was thinking about something that I read in your book. So when I was younger, I was shocked to learn that the tithing that I was giving was not being used for charity, but rather being used for buildings, church buildings, temples, etc., like that. And I was really upset by that, and that seemed like such a waste. But then something in your book made me think about maybe buildings are important in terms of community, and like it's a place, where people can gather for education, art, whatever, things like that. And I was wondering what your thoughts are about, creating buildings or for purposes of community, specifically. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not against buildings that are what they call third spaces. So our culture is in desperate need of third spaces where it's not home or work, right? And so one good argument for religion, if I were arguing against myself, an atheist, one good argument for religion is that we've always co-evolved with religion, and it's been a third space where we can gather as communities to do things like weddings and ponder the sacred and read holy texts together. And there is some value to that, certainly. And maybe we could get to a level where, especially as science keeps, doing what it's doing, maybe someday if we continue to co-evolve with religion, all of these buildings that used to be for we're the one true church, which is just getting more and more unsustainable in a modern world. Gen Z just can't get on board with that idea at all. Maybe there'll be someday where, as we continue to co-evolve with religion, those will be communal spaces where there's, cheaper preschool and soup kitchens and art shows and lots of things that we could repurpose those buildings for to still have something that society needs and still hold on to the sacred. So I'm not fundamentally against building buildings. I think my issue with the church is if we have to pay 10% of our income, especially when times are really tight and tough right now, the church should be paying 10% of its income to the poor, and it's less than 1%. So it's not paying its own tithing, and it's asking the members to. And I think that much we should be able to ask the church. And then as far as tax exempt status in the country, what I would love to see is a day where, okay, yeah, you can be tax exempt as a church, but you have to prove that you are an asset to the community. So Mormons, for the soup kitchen thing in Phoenix, you have to participate if you want tax exempt status, because you have to show that you have a certain amount of value to the community. And so I would like to see, so maybe over time, yeah, some of those buildings, as we continue to co-evolve with religion, maybe spaces that we truly value. Maybe as we force churches to be more communal and provide more communal services in order to get their tax exempt status, which is something that may happen in our lifetime. Maybe that would be a way to do it also. So yeah, I'm not against the buildings, but I do think that the church should be paying its own tithing. 10% of our income should be going to the poor, and that would drastically change a lot of lives.
Yeah, M. Gray has her hand up.
Hi. Big fan. Thank you for all of your work. I wanted to know, I think the biggest question that I have is across all religions or spiritual ideologies, are there any like universal, I know we tried to stay away from truth claims, the whole allergy to that, I love it. But are there any like universal, I guess, truths that we can share or that we can take away from them, kind of besides love? And I understand that the Uplift Kids might be the closest we find to that. But I wanted to know, with your background, maybe from an agnostic perspective, where we have kind of like this open mind, and is there like some sort of cosmology that all can agree on at any point at all?
Yeah, if I were to build truth claims as universal as I could go, there would be 3 things I think we could do there. One is the only thing that can't be an illusion is consciousness, is the fact that we're experiencing anything at all. Because even if we're wrong about our experience, and this is just like a computer game on an alien computer, the fact that we're still experiencing, the fact that we're wrong tells us that we're still experiencing. There's something to be experienced, even if we're wrong about the nature of our experience. So the fact that there is a quality to experience, I think, is the one thing that can't be an illusion. And then because we experience, there are better and worse ways to experience being a human. So suffering is bad, human well-being and thriving is good. Because we experience, you can suffer more or less as a human because there's a quality to experience. And then number 3 would be, we can build the world around what causes human beings to suffer less and thrive more. And what could we do to actually build societies and families and people and school systems where we use the data on human happiness and human well-being to actually build some of these systems. So that would be as universal as I think I could get, that we are conscious, therefore there's a quality to experience, therefore suffering is bad and thriving is good. Therefore, let's look at, the data and experience of humans and try to make the world less suffering and more well-being for more people. That's as universal as I think we can get. Now, does the universe necessarily care about that? Maybe not. But that may be, at least for Earth life, something that we could do.
Thank you,
Kendall,
so
I think it's time for a Kendall question.
All right. Yeah. So my first question from my list, oh man, now I want to order them to the topics that have come up, but I'll just go in the order I wrote them. So my first question I wrote down from reading the book is, what are the best candidates in your mind for non-religious binding myths that connect groups larger than 150 people?
The best ones. It really depends. I don't know if there's a best one there. Just anything that says this is the type of human that we are kind of a group for, like Bruce was talking about. These were for older people, and it's kind of this demographic, and we're doing this thing. And in some way, you're creating something that is bigger than you, that decreases suffering and increases human thriving and well-being.
Yeah. So what are some examples? Like 2 or 3, like really good, like, oh wow, this could really spark and like connect secular people, because we're so disparate. We have no potency against these like supernatural myths.
Yeah. That becomes more of a personality thing. So like for example, my husband is an Iron Man, and that is absolutely a secular community with a pilgrimage. It is spiritual. So I don't know who was talking about running being their spiritual practice, but like long runs and long bike rides are his meditation time individually. And then he trains with coaches and people in the area. They'll do a bike ride together on a Sunday or whatever. And then you take a pilgrimage to an Ironman, and you do it, with your people. And then you have people cheering, like we're cheering the human spirit that you're able to do all this, and then do a marathon at the end, and we're all cheering for you. And then he goes and volunteers at the finish line. He just got back from Hawaii, where he was just a volunteer, and just cried the entire day because he's volunteering at the finish line when the Ironman pros come in, and they get to see their families, and they get to be, and you just get to see every human emotion. And it's incredibly, incredibly spiritual. And there's individual, and there's local community, and there's also a bigger community. And when I was looking at this, I was like, oh my God, like this is a secular church with people and rituals and a pilgrimage, and small, there's an individual level and a local level and a semi-local level and a world level. And it's really functioning, and I think doing something really beautiful. And you could do the same thing with a yoga group. You could do the same thing with, there's philosophy conferences that I do that operate in a similar way. That just goes down to, what makes you feel alive, personality things. I don't know if I can say that a philosophy group is any better than an Ironman group. Those are just different people. Those are just different things.
Yeah, I'm just still looking for something that, like, anyone who's not for organized religion, I want to like build a worldwide thing whose purpose is to like reduce suffering and increase thriving. I need like a story.
Maybe secular humanism would be the best for that. So there's, instead of 10 commandments, there's 10 commitments. If you looked at the list, you would say that, yeah, I can get on board with everything on this list.
But would you say they have a compelling story, a myth?
No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, they don't have that. Like,
no,
that's
why it's not.
Are good,
Yeah.
but we need a myth. We need some story. It could be a real story. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't have to talk about this more, but like, we have a real need for a story that people are like, I want to be part of that group because I heard this compelling story.
Yeah, those turn into cults. And there's the story aspect is lacking in the secular world. You're right. It is a problem that we have. And one of the problems is it's actually hard to write a gripping story. If I said, write a story that's just going to grip people and they're just going to want to give their lives because of this story, it's actually very difficult to do. It's not something that you can just produce because you want to. It's almost something that arises out of us because of deeper human archetypes and lots of things going on. So as far as a story like that, that's far more difficult. We can have shared stories. Certainly, I do think that there's certainly political stories. So there's a story of what we are as Americans. And that can actually be, even though Washington, maybe never cut down the cherry tree, there may be some value in having a country and having the fact that we can, like, one of my tax dollars can actually feed a child in Washington, DC their lunch. That's actually an incredible human feat. There's actually maybe some value in having shared stories like that. So we have to be careful with stories. We need them. We need more of them in the secular world. But when they get too gripping, almost, when the story's too good, then it becomes a reality, and then it becomes a cult.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'll think on that more. But Bruce had a question, then I'll go through others.
Let me give you one more example while you're thinking of it. There's a reason that every single matriarchy or indigenous population in the world. This is the problem that we're dealing with in the world, in the entire world. Not a single indigenous people survived colonialism untouched, even though we have evidence that show like that the Blackfoot people or whatever, like low rates of depression, low rates of crime, low rates of poverty, like as far as human happiness, indigenous matriarchal societies were on paper far better for human happiness and well-being. But every single indigenous community in the entire planet was touched by colonialism in some way, because some of these stories, the ones that make you want to give all of your power and resources and control female reproduction, those stories produce more money and power. And then that money and power takes over. And we don't know what to do about that problem. How do we combat that? How could we possibly create a society around human well-being if another story over here makes more money and power and resources and controls female reproduction, produces more children, produces more communities to raise those children? Is secularism going to lose just because that virus of the mind is so powerful? We essentially haven't found a way to stop it. I mean,
yeah, the dark side is strong, the potential there. I feel such a need to do something to fight against this worldwide web that is growing, you know.
We do it in the part of the universe that we have control over, which is ourselves and our families and our local community. I think that's the best bang for our buck as far as where to put our effort.
Okay.
All right, Bruce.
Yeah, I just had some comments. You mentioned third places. I was just in a recent study out of USC by the occupational therapy department on third places for seniors. And a swimming pool, the Rose Bowl Aquatic Center, I swim 4 days a week. That's a real community. The Village was my second. I have a former Weight Watchers group that we've left Weight Watchers, but we meet weekly and we get together every 2 months for lunch. And they're all like children of Holocaust survivors. And we had some real good discussions yesterday. But I also have like a games group that we've been doing for 35 years and a dinner group for about 30 years. It doesn't scale, but it's my world that I've created. But my dinner group and my games group, the people are starting to die because I'm one of the younger. Not scalable. You can't push it out to the world. But in my little world, those individual things where my third place is my community, I work really hard, to keep.
It takes effort. Yeah, it takes intention to do. And I think what you're doing is the right approach. I think that you're going to get more for you personally and also do more for the world by doing that ground.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think.
Up kind of effort. And just like anything in life, like it may take more intention, but I do think it's the right way to go. I think you're onto something.
Yeah. And don't forget the book club, Bruce. Bruce is one of our founders of the book club. And I feel like, that was very intentional on our part when we started. We just met all together, Landon, Bruce, and I, on a Reddit thread talking about the book Sapiens. And somebody who knew that I had a background in librarianship said, I challenge you to start a post-Mormon book club. Anonymous Landon, anonymous Bruce said, I can help with that. And we saw this need. And once we had our first meeting and met the first 15 people and we saw this need, we're like, we are committed to keep this going. And we're in our 5th year, and although I've never met a lot of people in person, I have met a lot. I consider all of you, such wonderful friends just through that process. So you do have to be intentional. I think
you do have to be intentional.
And then, like Stone Soup, then people start adding, right, their own thing, and then it really does become something. So wise words from Britt, absolutely.
And like Bruce, like I've kind of cobbled together a pretty good community to the point, like when my daughter fell and she was in the hospital for 6 weeks a year or two ago, I had as many meals as I would have had as a Mormon. Like I was well taken care of. I really had rebuilt my community. And so when we talk about the children, then my piecemeal community is unique to me. I can't pass that down to my kids. And so maybe the best that we can do is teach our kids the tools of how to piecemeal their own communities. And so even though I'm using Uplift Kids with my family, and maybe it's not yet connecting to a big national thing where I can go to a building, which would be lovely if I could go to a building and have other adults teach these lessons too, even if it doesn't get there, because maybe it's not dogmatic enough to get the money to be able to build something like that. Even so, by me doing it with my kids, I'm giving them the tools where they hopefully then can build their own lives of meaning and build their own communities and piecemeal their own community. And maybe that's actually a better tool, because then when instead of building just on Mormonism and then half of them at least are going to go through a faith crisis at some point, rather than doing it that way, maybe it's more stable ground of saying, hey, here's how to find people and create your own community, and you need this. And then when they are adults, they can actually know that they need to make that intention and put in that time to do that, and have the tools to be able to build that in their own unique way. That would be my hope and my goal with instead of passing down something that goes generation to generation, maybe I can just pass down the tools for them to build their own lives of community and meaning.
I think Landon has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, I growing up LDS, I don't think that building on the Jesus myth is necessarily a bad thing when we look at the Christian values and the Christian teachings. It seems like if you could just take the mysticism out of it, the resurrection and just follow the philosophy and the teachings, that would be a wonderful myth to build the world around.
It's one of the reasons, it's one of the reasons that I'm pessimistic that we can do something, because look at what we did with Buddha and Jesus. There's no one that Christian National needs more than its own Jesus, right? And so the fact that we can, as a people, take someone like Buddha, homeless mystic, Jesus, homeless radical mystic, and create empires out of them. When you go to Buddhist countries, there's as much prosperity gospel and corruption. I mean, it's the same shtick, but with Buddha instead of Jesus. So the fact that we could build an empire like Christian nationalism from the teachings of Jesus just shows what we do as humans. We cult even when we have a story, even when Jesus is specifically saying, you're not going to go to heaven if you're rich, beware of wealth, maybe forgive people and don't charge people interest. Even though he's explicitly saying that in the text, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because we wanted it to, be more than that. And so we create it to be more than that.
Yeah, it seems like the power mentality to grab power overrides everything else, and they'll always twist the myth.
And so I think even the best story and the best person, like the most humble, amazing person or whatever who wanted to change the world, it doesn't matter if it starts there, because the end of it will be something like Christian nationalism. Like, that's just what we do as humans. So maybe there will always be a society or a matrix or an institution in the wilderness. Maybe that will always be the case, because that's human nature. But we can cobble together our communities in the wilderness. And I think there's great beauty in that. And we can teach our kids how to have tools to do that, to build that for themselves too.
All right. Well, I'll jump in here.
One other question. Sorry. What do you see as, in China and stuff, they've almost built the myth around communism and political systems. Do you see that as the future of secularism, that it goes more towards political systems as the myth, as opposed to religion's myth as what we follow?
Yeah, that was Nietzsche's first prediction when he really talked a lot about the death of God. And he said the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create political gods. And these are going to be everything that God promised us, utopia, and you're on the right side and you're on the right team, everything that we got in religion, but we're getting it from a political God. And when we look at the 20th century and the wars of the 20th century, we can see that definitely the decline of Christianity led to the rise of political gods. Even what we're seeing in Europe, because Europe secularized earlier than us. They're about 50 years ahead of us, and huge rise in political nationalism. We had Brexit. There's a rise of fundamentalism, a rise of Islam, a rise of nihilism, and a rise of political religions. And for a while, that's going to be what happens in the shadow of the death of God, is we keep doing the same thing, but we're going to do it with political gods. So at least for the time being, I think that Nietzsche was right. I think the first thing that fills that vacuum in the death of God is political gods and political religions. And maybe we're going to have to learn the hard way that we're going to have to decouple from those two. But we're not there yet. We're in it.
All right. My next question was, you talk in the book about shattering the myth of separateness as a big deal. Number one, can you give us some experiences about your battle with aloneness versus connectedness? And then number two, give us some specific techniques and suggestions in this area.
Yeah, it's something that pretty much any mystic tradition and any religion will talk about, the illusion of being separate, because you can feel like you're totally alone and isolated. And really, you are the conglomeration of so much. So when you actually look at it, I can feel like I'm all alone in my she shed over here. But if I'm really paying attention, there's a line, for example, of daughter to mother, and then my mother had a mother, and then her mother had a mother. And that goes back for human history, 300,000 years. That goes back for mammal history. That goes back into invertebrates. I mean, it goes back so far, and all of that still lives inside my body. And my brain, and why I think the way that I do, is the conglomeration of not only my genetics, but it's a room of every person I've ever met, and the room of the books that I've read and the conversations that I've been a part of. And when you, even something like a plate of food, when you look at how many people were involved in getting that plate of food onto your plate from different parts of the world and how it came to you, there's thousands of people that were a part of that meal that were unseen. And so when we start to actually pay attention, there's nothing in nature that is completely disconnected to everything else. And so some of it is the delusion of our neurotic minds of thinking that we're totally separate, when we are vastly connected in ways we don't fully understand. Vastly connected to the earth and to other people. And we can actually tap into that more and more.
Okay, because the way my brain was originally programmed is when you're alone, when you feel like no one understands, then think of Christ and he's experienced everything you've experienced. And I want to replace that with something else. And so you're saying just wow, all these things that I rely on and enjoy, they were made possible by so
I
many
don't know
people
if
that I
it's
rely
John
on.
Ogden who does this. I don't know if he's still here in the chat. I don't think he's here. But it might have been John Ogden, or it might have been Noah Rasheta, but something he does with his kids to teach him this connectedness is they'll do this at a meal. So they'll do the mealtime thing, or even just in a room. If I actually cataloged everything in this room and what it means to me, and I have pictures on the wall and stories and trinkets from various travels. I have things from all over the world, from all kinds of people in this room with me. And if I really pay attention to it, it shatters this illusion that just because I'm in this she shed alone, that I'm really alone. In my body, there's a history in the universe I'm a part of, the nature that I'm a part of. And even just in this room, if I were to really pay attention to how many people are in this room, it would be thousands of meaningful people to me that I'm a part of. And so there's just little things that you can do like that, where you can redirect your attention instead of just feeling alone because maybe you're in a room alone. Really start to pay attention to how many people are in that space, or how many people were involved in the food that you are just eating in a meal. That's a good one to do with
I
kids.
love that. That's so practical. You talk about contemplative practices. Would you put that in your top 5 personally effective contemplative practices, or what would be the top ones?
You ask really good questions.
I think a lot.
Yeah, I would say I would say I might have more on that top 5 list than the connective one, because before you can feel maybe connected, you at least have to just be awake in general to then build a bridge to life around you. You also have to wake up just yourself. And so maybe my top 5 would be things that help me to just wake up to my experience, because then when I'm awake to my experience, then I can start building bridges to how connected I am. So for example, one that I do in the shower is usually my neurotic brain in the shower, especially when I wake up. Like, to be honest with you, when I wake up, I'm semi-suicidal. And I say that jokingly because like it's not like I have a plan or anything. I just wake up really grumpy. Like I'm just really a grumpy goose, especially in the mornings. And so usually in the shower, it would just be some neurotic rabbit hole of thought, and I'm just in the shower suffering. Or I can sit in the shower and I put my hands up and I try to explain to an alien what it's like to have hot water falling on your hands. And because that really helps me to pay attention. And then I start to think, how many humans in human history would a hot shower have been a once in a lifetime experience for a king? And I'm just
yeah, I
like
love this.
millions, maybe billions of humans. That shower would have been a top peak life experience. And we're sitting in there suffering, thinking about our to-do list. So I think more of my top 5 list would be things like that, things that help you just wake up and just like, I'm awake, I'm alive, I'm experiencing, and just pop out of that neurotic, pessimistic, self-obsessed way that our brain naturally thinks. I would think some of those would be more in my top 5 list. But once you get that awakening where you're because those 2 showers are fundamentally different. It's a shower where I'm suffering, or it's a shower where, oh my God, I'm having an amazing human experience that so few humans got to have. And if I'm paying attention to hot water falling on my hands, it's an incredibly pleasurable experience when you're paying attention to it, like you were to explain it to an alien. Those are really different showers. And so those kind of things, once you're awake and you're waking up to that, then you can start building bridges to, how do I connect to outside of me? And then that just keeps going. You wake up more and more internally, you connect more externally. That's why there's always spirals in spirituality, because you're spiraling deeper in and you're spiraling wider out. And then you spiral deeper in, and then you go, and then you connect deeper out. That's why there's always labyrinths and spirals in spirituality. And at John Ogden's retreat place, they have a labyrinth where you do some of this work. You go in and out like that in labyrinth work.
Yeah, that was the final words of your book. Whatever you do, don't go back to sleep. And we do. We go back to sleep.
Yeah.
We got to wake back up, which is why I'm looking for those techniques that I can install throughout my day so I can be more.
And the reasons I didn't put those in the book is because they're so incredibly individual. They're so individual. And so you actually have to be on the path of finding those shortcuts for you. So first you have to experience it, and then how do you shortcut into it? So for some people, it's the breath. For me, it's a lot more to do with language. Language, just like, that's my shortcut. There's little quotes around me that like, okay, I'm awake. And so then I build into my life, my little shower routine, whatever, my little shortcuts. And then I'm building it into my life so that I don't go very long with being asleep. I used to be able to go months, without, where I'm just reacting. Like when I look back at me being in college, there'd be moments of awareness and moments of feeling awake, and then months of just kind of reactivity. And now it feels like I'm much more connected to myself, where I don't go very long without feeling like, oh, I was asleep there for a little bit. I was just in reaction mode. I usually don't go more now than a day or two, because I have these shortcuts built into my life.
Yeah, Dana has a question real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I'm going to turn that on for a sec. This is going back a little bit, and I don't even know if it's a real question or if people have answers, but maybe more of a commentary on groups. So I used to lead just everything under the sun with, homeschooling and prepper, and like just super, super into it. And now I'm in a very different path after we've learned a lot more with my trans son. And really feeling that loss of community, right? Oh gosh. Okay, really feeling the loss of community. But speaking about meals and I don't know, in my head it's kind of like when you're ministering, right? Like in the LDS church, and you get to go ministering or visiting, teaching, and we're in such a populated area of Utah that it's automatic community, not just finding a third space, not just finding, well, here's this group that is all the other parents of trans kids, or here's this group that's ex-Mormon, or here's this group. I'm really missing just being in a neighborhood and having everybody on 3 streets just being neighbors. And I don't know if that's only really unique to, like, it's just heavily populated with so many people who feel the same way about a religion, or if there's places out there where you're just neighbors and you do just see, my neighbor needs a meal, my neighbor needs me to say hi. It's kind of like it's just super awkward right now where I think we don't even have the very basic neighbor stuff since I left. So anyway, I don't know if that's really a question.
Yeah.
But
There's 3 thoughts that I had that came up, and then I gotta hop off again because I do have a 1 o'clock client who probably will show up. So 3 things came up for me. 1, there are neighborhoods like that where it's like we just take care of each other because we're fellow humans, but they are small communities. So the reason that we can look at, oh, Finland is so happy and all of this stuff, and there's a lot of atheists in Iceland and they seem to be doing okay, it's because it's a small homogenous group of people. And when you have a small homogenous group of people that have culture, there are places where yeah, they take care of each other more, not around a religion, but just because they're neighbors and they help each other. It tends to not be the case for America. 1, because we have all of our myths about being independent, and so just how America's built and how we drive and how we build houses. It's much more of that rugged individualist America myth. So we don't get that as much in America without some kind of shared some kind of shared community. Other countries, especially small homogenous countries, can have that neighborhood environment. And so what we have to do then is people will say, oh, now that I've left Mormonism, I have so much more time and money. And it's like, you should have everything that you put into Mormonism money-wise should be put into some other community or some other something. And everything that you used to do time-wise, as far as moral education for your kids and visiting, teaching, you should be doing for your life. And so instead of doing visiting, teaching, that time that you would have spent on a Wednesday night or whatever, or mutual or whatever, goes to, hey, this is a person in my life that I want to invest in because I want to be there for that person, and I think that person can be there for me, and I'm investing in this friendship. I'm going to show up for this person. I'm going to text this person. I'm going to Marco Polo this person. I'm going to check in. And so we essentially have to keep doing what we were doing as Mormons, but it's just not going to be on a platter anymore. It's something that you have to individually build. And then I will mention privilege, because there are times, like I could imagine a scenario where financially, because of my area being in Boise, where I may feel like I need to show up at my local ward because I don't give a fuck about beliefs right now. Maybe my husband dies and I have 4 children and I have 2 of those children have special needs. There are times where being deconstructed or being an atheist or being an ex-Mormon takes a lot of privilege, because that means that you're able to build community outside of that. And so if there's ever a time where you feel like I don't have enough privilege in my life to be able to rebuild outside of this, I don't think there's necessarily anything morally wrong with, don't lie to do it, because that kind of destroys you. But if there's a way that you can, there are people who stay involved in various religions because they really don't have the privilege like especially if an isolated religious community, you don't have the privilege to have any resources outside of that community. And it's been like that for a long time in human history. And so I do think that we have to recognize that sometime all this talk about rebuilding community, there are people and privilege that has to be a part of that conversation. We can't just say that everybody can do this. Everybody can just like leave their local religion. Sometimes there's legal costs. Sometimes there's costs to children. Sometimes there's social costs that have to be considered. And I don't think we should have to feel shame about that because that can be a reality too. So small communities exist usually outside of America. I would just encourage you to invest all the time that you used to invest in church into other people in other communities and take some time with that and see what comes from that. For me, that ended up being enough for me as far as I'm in crisis mode and I need some help. I didn't have to go back to my Mormon ward for meals when I was living at the hospital for 6 weeks. But if I hadn't have built that yet, I would not have felt shame about going back to my Mormon ward and saying, hey, I'm struggling with my beliefs here, but I'm in need of some help. I think we can, those conversations we can do on an individual basis. I hope something in there helped. All right, 1 o'clock. I gotta hop off again.
Go.
All right.
Thank you for
Love you
coming
guys.
back. It was
Hey,
like
bye.
Christmas
That
miracle.
was so great. Thank you.
Love you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you, Britt. Thank you so much. Oh, that's great. Yeah, and this kind of takes us right back up to the top of our hour, and we'll go through some final slides. We want to say again, thank you, Kendall, so much for preparing everything and then being very flexible in what you were doing. So that was excellent. Kendall has run, I think this is his third book club that he's been the discussion leader, and he does an incredible job. Kendall, you should throw your details of where people can find out more about you in the chat, because you're awesome and you have some great resources and website and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to add really quickly before we talk about our book that we're going to do next month. This is a book by Dan McClellan that's coming out. It's called The Bible Says So: What We Get Right and Wrong About Scripture's Most Controversial Issues. This is coming out in the spring. You can pre-order now. This is going to be amazing. A Mormonish podcast that Landon and I run. We are having Dan on Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. We're going to talk more about this book, and we're going to talk about the apocalypse. So a little plug there if you want to see some Dan, and go out and pre-order this book. I know that we'll be having him on to talk about this in the spring, and we'll be talking about this more. So go pre-order that. And let's go to our next slide. Our next book, as we talked about at the top of the show, is Deborah Feldman's Unorthodox, and it's Jackie who is going to be our discussion leader. And I think Jackie's here, and I think she has a little preview to give us of what we can expect next month. That'll be on Sunday, December 8th at 11 a.m.
Okay, I'm trying to find Jackie.
Okay. She's here somewhere. Are you here, Jackie?
I think I unmuted me and my
okay, I
video
think
was
Bruce will
on.
try to find you and spotlight you. So yeah, get that dang spotlight off me. Anyway, she was nice enough to reach out and to say, yep, I'll be a discussion leader. For those of you that are newer to the book club, once we put out our list of books every August, people pop up and say, I'll do it. So here's Jackie.
Okay. Woo, can you see okay?
Yep.
All right, you guys, first of all, trigger warning. There's some really rough stuff in this book. So I want to put that out. And I had to put the book down for a couple weeks and didn't know if I would be able to finish the book, let alone cover it. But I'm very glad I was able to work through that and read through the book, because it's deeply meaningful, it's thought-provoking, and you will really grow in empathy. And of course, the parallels with Mormonism are right there. So I'm channeling Kendall Christensen, and I bought the book, How to Read a Book.
Yeah.
And Kendall, I'm getting through part of that book, and then I've got to just focus on unorthodox. But there's 3 major questions that in this How to Read a Book says, and one of them is, what is the book about? So I want you all to think about this when you're reading the book. I kind of consider it a thesis statement. It's definitely where I'm kind of coming from. This will probably be the basis of as we go through this book, and then we'll branch outward. But what is the book about? I say that it is the author freeing herself from her religious system's mechanisms of control when the system is untethered from reality and shackled in shame and secrecy, which kills authenticity and honesty. So I think you can hear these words: religious systems, mechanisms, untethered from reality, shame, secrecy, honesty, authenticity. So kind of put that in your brain. And also love that it's also based on so much of how she got out through books. And I think that's enough. I was going to read a little bit from the epilogue, but you all can read the epilogue. In the epilogue, she talks about why she wrote the book, and it's very moving. She writes beautifully. And I think it's really a prize winner of a book.
Rebecca, you're muted.
Say thank you so much for volunteering to do this. And the cover alone is so provocative. I just got it, and I am really excited to be able to dive into that. So, all right, we have a couple more slides as we end here. And then, like I said, we officially end the meeting, and then we move over to not recorded, just kind of a get to know you talk kind of a thing. Let's really quickly say that all of our meetings are recorded. You can find them anywhere you can find podcasts, the Good Book Club podcast, and you can catch up on the last couple years. We also have a YouTube channel, as I described, so you can see the slides instead of just audio, and you just need to search the Good Book Club for Post-Mormons. And like I said, we don't really advertise this, so it's kind of just under the radar. We like to keep things private, but awesome discussions from the past if you want to dive in and check out some other books that we've covered. Let's see. We also kind of curate other things, not books, that are on the media. This is radar, on the media radar. We have a Facebook page called the Good Media Club, and we'll just throw things up there, and anybody's welcome to throw things up there if you join it. For example, when we first got wind of Heretic, right? We put that right up there, said this is coming out. So, because there are other things besides books. I know it's blasphemy for me to even say that, but there are, and you can check some things out on the Good Media Club if you want on Facebook. And then, of course, we have Mormonish Podcast that Landon and I started kind of morphing out of the book club and all the different authors and people that we encountered in running the book club. So that's really fun. We put out episodes on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Mountain Time and Fridays at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. And like I said, our episode coming up on Tuesday is Dan McClellan. You're going to want to check this out. He talks a lot about his new book and also the apocalypse, what it is and what it isn't. So that's going to be really good. And let's see, if you're brand new today and you just kind of stopped in to see what we're about and you'd like to actually kind of officially join and get information, you can send me an email. If you don't want to have anything to do with social media, you can email thegoodbookclub@mail.com, and I will send links and information that way. And then you can participate. You can also find us on Facebook. That's our logo there with that row of books. And you can just request to join and we'll let you in, of course. And then we put the links and we kind of discuss the books throughout the month on that page. So that's really fun. And you can also find us on Instagram. But anyway, connect with us, find us, because we'd love to have more people participate. We have, I think, a really good group. If you do send us an email to the Good Book Club, sometimes it goes to spam because it's mail.com, not Gmail. So make sure you check that because I will always answer back. So now we will say thank you, everybody, very much. And we'll officially end our meeting.